r/AskReddit. People who grew up rich but turned out poor. What is your story?
My grandparents were very wealthy, so they bought my parents a house and basically supported my family, even paying for my school tuition. I wasn't aware of this. Because of this, my parents were lazy and never really had jobs. They were always at home, and I didn't find any of this unusual. We had extravagant vacations, and I remember being given everything I'd ever asked for. But my grandpa died when I was about 10, grandma following suit soon after, and all his kids started fighting over the money. I'm pretty sure they're still fighting. Anyway, soon half the lights in our house didn't work, our TVs were all broken, and our cars broken down and barely usable. I was wearing the same uniform all throughout high school, and as a teenager I wore nothing but hand-me-downs. My allowance decreased instead of increased year by year. There were no more vacations. But my parents wasted the rest of their savings on appearing rich, buying fancy jewelry and clothes for themselves and crap, racking up credit card debt. Then they'd host parties for friends in expensive restaurants, and I'd feel so angry because back home we'd be eating nothing but canned food. It honestly scarred me so much that my only goal is to become financially stable, and I plan to stay employed without ever retiring because I don't want to be like them, jobless and stupid.
Dad went to jail for housing fraud in 2010. I was in my teens and $10 million was seized. Went from a $800,000 house to homeless in 4 days because our family didn't even know he'd been in court for 2 years.
We were really well off in Korea until we moved to America. It seemed like a piece of cake for a family like mine to start life anew with enough financial backings. My father had worked hard for his family. In the first 2 years of our life in America, my parents were scammed by shady Korean immigration lawyers. Twice. Blew all of their savings and emergency funds. We started from rock bottom again. I remember skipping 2 meals a day so we could have food to go around everyone. I also remember pulling the plug on the refrigerator because what's the fudging point if there's nothing in it? We don't look back or talk about those times anymore.
I grew up rich. I wouldn't say I'm poor, but I don't live near as well as my parents. I grew up in a house which Zillow has now valued at $5 million in a very wealthy area. My mom never worked. My dad had an office and employees, and besides my mom, 3 ex-wives. My grandmother and great-grandfather came from extreme wealth. And really, it just turned out that my dad, though he was pretending for years to run a business, have an office and be a big important person, never actually made any money. All of it was drawn from a trust that had been set aside for him, and finally when it went dry, it was over. When my parents butted, I inherited about $13,000, meh, that's life. I have 2 siblings that roam the earth thinking there's still something they can capitalize on from all this, some privileged bank of connections they can make withdrawals from. But I've accepted that I'm just ordinary folk. Life doesn't owe me anything. I grew up in a wealthy part of the United States, and everyone I went to school with had wealthy parents. It's amazing how many of these children are now mediocre at best and not high-income earners. There was an assumption that if they simply went to college, graduated and got a job, they'd be as successful as their parents. When they weren't, they felt the world was unfair and became apathetic. My parents' neighborhood has homes in the $2 to $20 million range, and about 50% of the houses now have adult children in their 50s living with 80-year-old parents.
My dad had a stroke, and the complications from that, the medical bills, and my mother becoming his caretaker led us to eventual homelessness over the course of 5 years. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s. By the time I was 18, we had almost no budgets because of medical costs. I became a teacher, and am now lower middle but and working toward middle but. My wife works for a non-profit which helps people attain financial stability.
My dad was a millionaire, cheated on my mum left him, he had a mental breakdown, lost everything, still trying to get her back 10 years later.
Went from very well off to middle but. Grew up in Peru, my family was involved in government and acting, we appeared in a few shows, my mom was the face of a detergent brand, my sister was the face of some brand of cereal, I was doing commercials weekly. Being well off in a Latin American country was dangerous in the 90s, still is, you have no idea. My mom had an armored car, we had shared guards with the other houses in my small block, we got followed all the time, robbed at gunpoint. Moving to America to be safe meant losing it all and starting over. We cried in the plane. My mom even worked at Subway with my sister so we could get by. Now we live a nice secure life in Florida and I wouldn't go back.
Truth. Didn't realize how wealthy we were growing up. I knew we were well off, but I definitely believed we were firmly middle but. Looking back though, if we were middle but we were the top 5%, and there is no way my dad, stepmom are middle but anymore, although my mum might still fit the description. I don't think we were ever spoiled kids, except maybe my younger brother, as we generally followed rules, respected our parents, did chores we were asked, etc. That said, we had every game system, we all had computers, TVs in our bedrooms. Christmas always involved a lot of presents, typically with one big gift for each person, like a PS4 for my brother. Our house was a big 5-bedroom place with a pool and a built-in waterslide in the suburbs. Pretty much we were well-behaved kids who as a result tended to get anything we asked for. I'm now 29, married, with a decent job, and yet I feel like I am so far away from that kind of financial affluence. We are still paying off debt from when we were in college. We rent a house, but can't afford to buy one yet. We make ends meet, but by no means keep up with any tech trends, saving for a Switch sometime next year. By contrast, my dad and stepmom own 6 properties now, both are extremely successful in their careers. I think now I am actually middle but, and it makes the Gerbut look a lot greener from before.
Cocaine is a heck of a drug.
Grew up rich in Pakistan until my mother got ill and made a string of bad choices in her business. Her business partner took off with the money. Went from rich to homeless. Luckily my father still had his well-paying job, so we could slowly start to rebuild. There was a lot of loan to pay back, which my father and mother managed. Mother started from scratch again. Whereas I moved out to Germany on a loan from friends to study further, and currently I'm doing my PhD, which doesn't really pay much, but to be honest I don't care as long as it is enough to feed me and I get to do what I love.
Well, not exactly rich, but my family was making a fair sum when I was a kid. Then there were but layoffs and now we live paycheck to paycheck. It's not that we don't make enough money, it's just that my parents, with all the respect, are financial imbeciles. On the bright side, seeing them as an example of what not to do, I learned everything there is to learn about personal finance and a fair bit about business. On the stupid side, I've repeatedly explained to my parents all the necessary steps for them to get out of their financial problems, but as my mom put it, if I can't spend my money then what's the point in even working? Like seriously woman, you can spend your money but not C king all of it. P.S. Sorry for the rant, had to get that off my chest.
My dad had a midlife crisis when I was in high school and left his family and job to move across the country to marry his lover. He still helped pay for some of our college, still graduated with debt, but no emotional support, no connections, no leg up on anything. After such a move I don't know if I could possibly have accepted any of that from him anyways. I am probably a little better off than most still, but I don't live in a 15,000 square feet house like I grew up in.
Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe and smack that bell icon to stay up to date on our videos. See you next time.